Welcome back. The tax season is here, and SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter says the high unemployment rate is concerning. He says the unemployment rate of 32.6% coupled with company closures is expected to have an immeasurable impact on the tax base. Kieswetter adds that lockdowns have also impacted the collection activities. Despite the economy starting to show signs of recovery, Kieswetter says it will take some time before it returns to pre-COVID-19 levels. He was speaking at the virtual launch of the tax filing season. To discuss this now, I'm joined by Ettiene Retief, Chairman of the National Tax and SARS Committee at the South African Institute of Professional Accountants, on what to expect from this year's tax filing season. Mr. Retief, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. I suppose what SARS needs to do is to determine how many taxpayers are left in the country currently, considering that many people have lost their jobs, are having passed away from COVID-19, and companies, especially small and medium ones, have closed.
Yes, definitely. I think we can add to that. There's been a number of immigrations also that has taken place. So there's potentially some high net worth individuals and people with scarce skills that have also left the country. We've seen people take early retirement as well as options for companies to seek relief. So especially during the time of kind of rationalizing employees. But we also have a knock-on effect of, other than just the employment rate, of that we can expect that you're not going to get salary increases as normal. We're not going to see bonuses as usual. So there's a knock-on effect that's still going to continue. But I think for now, it's very fair to say that we don't really understand the extent to what the tax base has shrunk because of the number of deaths and the lockdowns and the effect of trade. But I do think it's significant enough that we're going to see this effect for some years.
Yeah, projection-wise, I mean, what do you think Mr. Kieswetter and the SARS team should expect to get? I mean, what numbers should they be working with?
That's always a very difficult question because I think on the one side, it's Treasury has done a lot of homework in determining what numbers need to be achieved and determine its policies and its spend accordingly. And SARS essentially is a collection agent of that. So, but what we've also seen is that, especially at last year, when we expected that SARS might not hit its target, it exceeded its capabilities of collection. So I do think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that SARS is pursuing. Those are the guys who in the past have not paid their taxes, going after some of the illicit trades, kind of closing off claims that people have made and fraudulent claims. So the tax collection is not just on the current base that is there, it's also trying to claw back those taxes that have been lost due to the last few years of kind of like not having those persons in the tax base, or due to people claiming values or not making payments as due. So I do think there's some room there where SARS, from a compliance point, can bring in some of the numbers necessary to meet those revenue collection targets.
Yeah, I see Mr. Kieswetter also mentioning from a compliance viewpoint the voluntary one from large businesses on the international segment. The pressures on finances and economy are global, as we know currently.
Definitely. And you'll see every country at the moment is fighting for as much taxes and much of those revenues as possible. But, I think from a South African context, it's not necessarily worthwhile for us to say, well, the rest of the world. I think from our point, the most important thing to try and do is to make sure that we can avoid the artificial shrinking of our tax base. You must also understand SARS has very little impact in things like unemployment rate. That's outside of their scope. Where they've got a control of is ensuring that everyone who should be in the tax base is in there and that compliance is there. That's a different sphere to look at, for instance, unemployment rate. But even the unemployment rate that we have is not a true unemployment rate. It's a measure at this point in time of the people we are measuring. So we're not even looking at people who have early retired or have not found jobs recently. And I think one of the key factors for me in that is that the the knock-on effect of all of this, other than just unemployment, is also with the lack of increases and bonuses and those things going forward, is remember, it's not just the direct tax that I can collect from you on your salary that you earn. There's also the indirect taxes on your spend. So the less you've got available as disposable income, the less you're going to spend. So when you're not buying that new TV or going to restaurants and those things, it's not only an impact on that sector, that other industry, it's also the indirect taxes like VAT that, for instance, isn't collected. So the knock-on effect is not just employees tax, it's corporate and VAT and capital gains tax and all these other things that come with it. And they all have their own kind of, let's call, time frames, and when we'll see the most of those impacts actually materializing.
Yeah, and time-wise as well, if you look at the tax base, the impact of the fact that young South Africans, many of them are not acquiring the appropriate skills for the economy currently and going forward, and they're not employed, young people. So the tax base is being chipped away at. So even when you look into the future, you're facing a huge challenge.
Definitely. I think one of the most important things that we need to respect is that education and training is a critical part to and kind of developing key skills that are necessary is critical for the growth of the economy and the and rehabilitation of the economy, because we depend on these people to as the next entrepreneur starting a business, the next skilled people we need in business in order to drive it. We want to essentially be a hub where other parties look at it and say, we want to bring business to you. If we don't develop those, we're not going to get the foreign investment from it, and we are not going to be able to develop our economy to kind of like pull ourselves out of this. And unemployment, and here's the thing, is unemployment is one part of the puzzle. But even if I have that training, I still need to have the job available. So I still got to have the position of where companies can flourish in South Africa, where foreign investment can come to South Africa so that we can create the jobs that can be filled. So the puzzle is on one side is we need the people to be educated and get that training, but we also need to be able to support businesses to create the jobs. Government doesn't do jobs. Businesses make jobs. So we have to support the companies that will create the jobs that those skilled people can fit into. Both parts have to be there for the growth to happen. And we can't focus on just one part of it.
Yeah. So finally, it looks like, on the compliance side, they're going to have to hope that more and more people comply. But maybe SARS, as we conclude, Ettiene, is going to have to improve its collections. How it collects. But it's going to be restricted, by lockdowns and COVID. The impact of COVID-19 on tax collection cannot be ignored.
Yeah. Look, I must say, over the last years, SARS systems have evolved quite significantly, and to the point of where reviews, if you think of like a VAT review, you're not even seeing the auditor on the other side. You're doing it all online, where you're uploading your documentation, you're doing those engagements. SARS has put a number of implementations in place where you don't need to physically go into a branch to do certain functions. Not just e-filing, but in all of its channels that it has, it's been driving that kind of virtual space to operate. So I do think that those kind of things make it easier to comply and to collect. There are a number of shortcomings still, and those need to be addressed. So obviously, you'll see from the commissioner's side is that one of their biggest drives is from a compliance side, is to, one, make it easy for you to comply. Things like auto-assessment and the functions and the channels available for you to comply. The other is going after the persons who they can identify who do not comply. But I think the next step to this would be SARS focusing on being able to address the issues of a compliant taxpayer that are having trouble. Because at the moment we're still finding a lot of frustration in that part of it. But the mechanism to be able to file, especially the individual, those mechanisms are there. There's everything from a mobile app to e-filing to and even their online engagements and trying to help you to complete your return is actually pretty good. And if I had to compare 5 years ago to today, probably 90% of the stuff you'd have to go into a branch for, you can now literally do any hour of the day without needing to leave your home. So I do think they're going in the right direction to be able to collect those returns and to do a majority of general compliance virtually without needing to be affected by the fact that we're staying at home. The challenge is going to be that next step, because things like field audits and those things are obviously quite limited at this point now.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for your insights. I really appreciate them. Ettiene Retief, Chairman of the National Tax and SARS Committee in the South African Institute of Professional Accountants, just sharing some of those as the tax filing season just began yesterday.